The summer of 2019 pressed down on Calhoun County, Georgia like a soaked wool blanket. Heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves, turning every country road into a mirage. At 9:47 on a Sunday morning, the Buckhorn Fuel and Food off Route 9 felt almost peaceful. A few diesel trucks idling at the far pumps, an older white couple topping off their minivan, and a bored teenager sweeping the sidewalk with lazy strokes. Special Agent Diane Carter eased her black Chevrolet Tahoe, government plates, federal markings, the kind of vehicle any trained law enforcement officer would recognize instantly, into pump number 4. She had just come off a brutal 36-hour surveillance operation in Atlanta. Exhaustion sat heavy in her bones, the kind only career agents understand. 2 cups of gas station coffee and 3 hours of sleep were all that stood between her and a debrief with Deputy Director Carl Jameson in 4 hours. She was dressed for the long haul, dark jeans, navy linen blazer over a simple white tee, aviator sunglasses. Her Glock 22 and FBI badge were clipped visibly at her hip, the wind occasionally lifting the hem of her blazer just enough to catch the light. She swiped her government card, selected the grade, lifted the nozzle, and let the tank fill while she checked her phone. 14 unread texts. 2 voicemails from Supervisory Special Agent Patricia Holden. A calendar reminder blinking red. Diane exhaled slowly, letting the warm morning air wash over her face. For one quiet moment, she simply existed, a federal agent doing the most ordinary thing in the world. She had no idea that inside the store, 23-year-old part-time attendant Todd Whitfield had just picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency line for the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department. "Yeah," Todd said, voice low, eyes locked on Diane through the glass. "There's a black woman out here at Pump 4, driving one of them big black SUVs. I don't recognize her. She's just standing there. Looks suspicious." The dispatcher asked if she had done anything illegal. Todd repeated, "She's just standing there. It don't look right." 90 seconds later, Sheriff Dale Pute's cruiser came screaming into the lot with lights blazing. No siren, just a theatrical flash of red and blue that announced his presence to every soul in the parking lot. Pute was a big man, broad through the chest and shoulders, jaw carved from Georgia granite. 11 years as elected sheriff had taught him that the badge wasn't a responsibility, it was a crown. He stepped out slowly, thumbs hooked in his belt, hat settled, just so. His deputy, Greg Fenton, pulled in right behind him. Diane looked up from her phone. She assessed the situation the way she'd been trained to do for 12 years. Body language, theatrics, the swagger. She had seen this exact performance 1,000 times before. "Morning," she said, voice level and calm. Pute didn't answer. He stopped 5 feet away, eyes sliding over her, then the Tahoe, then back to her. "This your vehicle?" "Yes, sir." "Proof." She set her phone on the roof. "I'm going to show you my credentials. Federal agent. Reaching for my badge now. Keep your hands where I can see them." Pute barked, his own hand dropping to his sidearm. Everything accelerated. Fenton jogged around the cruiser, hand already on his holster. The teenager stopped sweeping. The older couple froze. Todd stepped out of the store. And Patricia Coleman, a 47-year-old retired schoolteacher sitting in her Honda Civic between pumps 2 and 3, quietly lifted her phone and pressed record. "Hands on the vehicle!" Fenton shouted. "Sir," Diane said, her voice still extraordinary in its calm clarity, "I am a federal law enforcement agent. I am reaching for my credentials. I need you to acknowledge that before I move." "Up against the vehicle now!" Fenton screamed. Pute stared at her for a long moment, contempt and absolute certainty flickering across his face. A man who had already decided the truth before evidence arrived. "Cuff her," he ordered. Fenton grabbed her arm. Diane did not resist. She had been trained for moments exactly like this. Sometimes the most powerful thing an agent can do is absolutely nothing. Let it happen, document it, and fight on level ground later. The cuffs clicked shut. She stood against her own Tahoe, hands behind her back, while Pute reached through the cracked window and popped the driver's door. "You need a warrant for that," Diane said quietly. "Or my consent. You have neither." Pute laughed, short, ugly, dismissive. Probable cause, sweetheart. Suspect in vehicle theft. He pulled the door open, and there, on the center console, half covered by case files, sat the second FBI badge wallet. Pute picked it up, opened it. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Diane M. Carter. Badge number 22,479. His face changed. The certainty cracked wide open. But as Deputy Fenton's hands trembled while removing the cuffs and Sheriff Pute stood frozen with the badge still in his grip, Diane Carter did the one thing no one in that parking lot expected. She reached for her phone and made a single comm call that would bring the entire weight of the federal government crashing down on Calhoun County before the sun even reached noon. The second FBI badge wallet lay open in Sheriff Dale Pute's palm, like an accusation made of gold and enamel. The morning sun caught the shield and threw sharp reflections across his face, illuminating every micro-expression as certainty fractured into something raw. Confusion, then dawning panic, then the first flicker of fear. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Diane M. Carter. Badge number 22,479. He stared at it for 4 full seconds, long enough for the parking lot to feel suspended in amber. Deputy Greg Fenton, still holding the cuffs he had just removed, looked over Pute's shoulder. His mouth open, closed, open again. "Sheriff, that's real," Fenton whispered. Pute closed the wallet with deliberate slowness, as though shutting it might make the reality disappear. He set it back on the center console, exactly where he had found it, then turned to face Diane. She had not moved. Hands free now, she stood with perfect posture against the Tahoe's door, shoulders square, chin level, expression unchanged. The same extraordinary stillness that had unnerved him from the beginning. Most people crumbled under the weight of his authority. This woman looked like she was calculating pi to the 30th decimal while waiting for him to catch up. Pute cleared his throat. "Look, ma'am," there was a call. Description matched. "We had to act." Diane tilted her head slightly. Not mocking, just precise. "I informed you I was a federal agent. Twice. I informed you I was reaching for credentials. You chose not to hear either statement. You chose to place me in restraints. You chose to begin an unconstitutional search of a federal vehicle without warrant or consent. Those are not mistakes, Sheriff. Those are decisions." Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. Every word landed like a calibrated strike. Across the lot, Patricia Coleman's phone stayed rock steady. The retired schoolteacher had not blinked since pressing record. The red dot blinked in perfect rhythm, with the cruiser lights still sweeping lazily over the scene. 3 other phones were up now. The teenage sweepers, the older couples, even Todd Whitfield from the store doorway. The footage was multiplying. Pute glanced around, suddenly aware of the audience. His theatrical swagger had evaporated. What remained was a man realizing the stage lights were harsher than he remembered. "Uncuff her completely," he muttered to Fenton, even though the cuffs were already off. Fenton stepped back quickly, hands raised as though to prove he was no longer part of whatever this had become. Diane rubbed her wrists once, more habit than necessity, then reached into the Tahoe and retrieved her primary badge and Glock. She holstered the weapon with the same economical motion she had used every day for 12 years, clipped the badge back to her hip, and turned to face Pute fully. "You now have 2 paths," she said quietly. "You can release the scene, return my property, and allow me to leave. Or I can make one phone call that turns this into a federal civil rights matter before lunch." Pute's jaw worked. "You're free to go. No charges. We'll call it a misunderstanding." Diane's expression did not soften. "I'm not leaving yet." She pulled out her phone, the same one she had set on the roof earlier. The screen was still open to her call log. She tapped one contact without hesitation. SSA Holden, cell. Before she pressed call, she looked straight into Pute's eyes. "When I make this call," she said, "it stops being your county. It becomes DOJ Civil Rights Division territory. They will ask for every use of force report, every citizen complaint, every internal affairs file from the last 15 years. They will not be polite. They will not be quick. And they will not leave until every pattern is documented." She paused, just long enough for the words to settle like lead. And trust me, Sheriff, she added softly, they've already started the paperwork. Pute opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Diane pressed call. The line rang once. Holden, came the crisp, no-nonsense voice. Patricia, it's Diane. Buckhorn Fuel and Food, Route 9, Calhoun County. I've been unlawfully detained and handcuffed after repeated verbal identification as a federal agent. Multiple civilian recordings exist. Request immediate preliminary inquiry and notification to civil rights. I'm remaining on scene. A 2-second pause, the professional equivalent of inhaling sharply. Copy, Holden said. Section Chief is being briefed now. Stay safe. Do not leave unless safety requires it. Agents en route. Diane ended the call. She looked at Pute again. They're coming, she said simply. For the first time in 11 years as sheriff, Dale Pute felt the ground tilt beneath boots he had always believed were planted on solid rock. He didn't know it yet, but the tilt had begun years earlier. Buried in 47 citizen complaints never sustained, in closed files, in quiet conversations between deputies who never quite dared speak louder. He only knew that right now, under the eyes of half a dozen cell phones and the gathering weight of federal scrutiny, the woman he had just handcuffed was no longer the suspect. She was the reckoning. For minutes after Diane ended the call, Pute's radio crackled with a voice he had never heard on his own channel before. The calm, unmistakable tone of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Director. Sheriff Pute, this is Director Ellis. I'm calling at the direct request of the FBI Atlanta Field Office and the United States Attorney General's Civil Rights Division. Do not leave the scene. Federal personnel are inbound. This is no longer a local matter. For minutes after Diane ended her call to Supervisory Special Agent Holden, the sheriff's radio crackled to life with a voice that carried none of the deference Pute was accustomed to hearing on his own channels. Calhoun County Dispatch, this is GBI Director Ellis. Patch me directly to Sheriff Pute. Priority traffic. The dispatcher hesitated, only a half second, but long enough for everyone within 10 feet to notice. Pute's hand moved mechanically to the mic clipped to his shoulder. He thumbed the transmit button. This is Pute. Sheriff, Ellis said, tone flat and unhurried. I'm calling at the direct request of the FBI Atlanta Field Office and the United States Attorney General's Civil Rights Division. Do not leave the scene at Buckhorn Fuel and Food. Federal investigative personnel are inbound from multiple agencies. This is no longer a local matter. Preserve all evidence in place. That includes any recordings, vehicle contents, and your own body-worn and in-car camera systems. Confirm receipt. Pute's thumb stayed on the button longer than necessary. The parking lot had gone unnaturally quiet. Even the diesel engines seemed to idle softer. Every phone still recording caught the exchange. Receive, Pute said finally. His voice came out thinner than he intended. Stand by for further instructions, Ellis replied. And Sheriff? Do not attempt to interview or reapproach the complainant without federal presence. That's a direct order. The radio went silent. Pute clipped the mic back to his shoulder. For the first time in 11 years, he looked genuinely small against the backdrop of his own cruiser lights. He turned slowly toward Diane. She hadn't moved. Arms folded loosely, she watched him with the same measured calm she'd maintained since the first hands on the vehicle command. No triumph in her expression. No anger. Just patient, professional certainty. Pute opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. We can resolve this here. No need to escalate. Diane tilted her head slightly. It already escalated, Sheriff. The moment you disregarded verbal identification of a federal agent and placed her in restraints in front of witnesses. The moment your deputy began an unlawful search. That escalation belongs to you. She gestured subtly toward Patricia Coleman's Honda Civic. And now it belongs to the public record as well. Pute followed her gaze. Coleman's phone was still up, steady as a tripod. The retired schoolteacher met his eyes without flinching. She had taught 5th grade for 28 years. She knew exactly when a child was trying to bluff their way out of consequences. By 11:14 a.m., Coleman uploaded the full, unedited clip to her Facebook page with a simple caption. Watch this happen in real time at Buckhorn this morning. No one should be treated this way. Sharing so someone sees. Within 17 minutes, the video had 1,400 views. By 11:45, it was on Twitter, retweeted by a civil rights account in Atlanta with the text, "FBI agent handcuffed at GA gas station after identifying herself. Footage is devastating. DOJ already notified." By 12:30 p.m., it hit local news in Albany and Macon. By 2 p.m., CNN had picked it up. The cheering read, "FBI agent wrongly detained in Georgia. Video spreads nationwide." Diane remained beside her Tahoe, answering only one question from the first arriving local reporter. No comment at this time. The matter is under federal review. She didn't need to say more. The footage was doing the talking. Inside the store, Todd Whitfield stood frozen behind the counter, watching the scene through the glass. He had made one phone call, one casual, whispered suspicion. Now helicopters were beginning to thump overhead, and national correspondents were pulling up in rental cars. Across town, investigative reporter Sandra Howell, who had spent 8 years quietly documenting disparate policing patterns in rural Georgia counties, received the video from a source at 11:47 a.m. She watched it twice, frame by frame. Then she placed a single call to County Attorney Robert Haynes. "Bob," she said when he answered on the second ring. "It's Sandra. I just saw the Buckhorn footage. I'm requesting 11 years of citizen complaint records, internal affairs dispositions, and use of force reports from the Sheriff's Department." Today, there was a long pause on the line. Haynes exhaled slowly. "I've been waiting for this call for 2 years, he said quietly. Sandra's pen stopped moving. "Then you already have the file ready?" "I do," Haynes replied. "And when the feds ask, which they will very soon, I intend to give it to them. Every page, every buried complaint, every pattern you and I both know is there." He paused again. "But Sandra, when you write this story, make sure the headline remembers one thing." "What's that?" The woman they cuffed wasn't just any driver. She was the one person in Calhoun County they couldn't afford to get wrong. Outside, Diane glanced at her watch. The debrief with Deputy Director Jameson was long past. She sent one quick text to Holden. "Still on scene. Situation stable. Viral spread confirmed. Standing by for arrival." Then she looked up at the pale Georgia sky, the same sky she had gazed at an hour earlier while fueling her tank, and allowed herself one small, private exhale. The ordinary morning was officially over. By the time County Attorney Robert Haynes arrived at the Buckhorn lot with his slim black briefcase, the one he had kept locked in his home safe for nearly 3 years, the first wave of national news trucks was already setting up live shots. But what Haynes carried inside that case would ensure the story breaking across every screen in America looked nothing like the good faith mistake Sheriff Pute was still desperately trying to sell. Robert Haynes pulled his silver Buick Enclave into the Buckhorn lot at 10:03 a.m., exactly 12 minutes after Sheriff Pute's frantic call. He parked beside the sheriff's cruiser, killed the engine, and sat motionless for 10 full seconds, long enough to draw one complete breath and let out slowly. In the passenger seat rested a slim black leather briefcase he had kept locked in his home office safe since the spring of 2017. The combination was his wedding anniversary. The contents had no official label, just a single yellow post-it note stuck to the front flap in his own precise handwriting. "Open only when it can no longer be ignored." Haynes stepped out, briefcase in his left hand, and walked straight toward Pute without glancing at the growing crowd, the news vans, or the federal agent still standing beside her Tahoe like a statue carved from calm. Pute met him halfway between the pumps and the store entrance. "Bob," he said, voice low and urgent. "We need to talk." Inside, Haynes didn't break stride. "No," he replied. "We talk here, in the open, where the cameras can see." Pute's eyes flicked toward Patricia Coleman's Honda Civic, her phone still recording, then toward the 3 other phones now openly filming from different angles. He swallowed once hard. Haynes set the briefcase on the hood of Pute's own cruiser, clicked the latches, and lifted the lid. 3 thick manila folders came out first, edges worn from years of handling, each labeled only with year ranges in black Sharpie. 2008 to 2012, 2013 to 2016, 2017 to 2019. Beneath them lay a smaller stack of printed spreadsheets, GCSE traffic stop data cross-referenced with racial demographics, and a single flash drive in a plastic evidence bag. I've been keeping these since you asked me, quietly, to handle the first excessive force complaint in 2016, Haynes said. His voice was even almost conversational. Every citizen complaint that crossed my desk involving your department. Everyone you told me to close without referral to post. Everyone the State Oversight Board never saw, because you marked them internal only. Pute's hands stayed at his sides, but his fingers flexed once. That's attorney-client privileged, he said. No, Haynes corrected gently. That's public record the moment a federal agent is unlawfully detained on video in your jurisdiction. And right now, there are at least 7 cameras capturing this conversation. He opened the top folder. Page 1, 2017. Black motorist stopped for failure to maintain lane. Dashcam showed perfect lane discipline. Officer escalated to taser after subject reached for phone to record. Medical bill, $3,200. Complaint closed unsubstantiated in 48 hours. Page 2, 2018. Hispanic family detained at county fair for suspicious behavior near rides. Children separated from parents for 97 minutes. No charges. Internal review. Officer discretion upheld. Page 3, February 2019, 3 months earlier. Retired black postal worker walking his dog after dusk. Stopped for matching description. Tossed after producing ID too slowly. Complaint routed directly to you. Closed without interview. Haynes kept turning pages. 47 formal complaints in 11 years. 0 sustained findings. 0 officer terminations. 0 mandatory reporting to Georgia Post. Racial disparity leaped off every sheet. Black residents, 31% of population. 68% of stops. 3.4 times more likely to be searched, yet lower contraband hit rate than white drivers. Pute stared at the open folder like it was a live wire. You kept copies, he said, almost a whisper. I kept everything, Haynes replied, because I knew, we all knew, that one day someone would come asking. And today that someone is standing 10 feet away wearing a federal badge and surrounded by cell phone footage that's already on CNN. He closed the folders with a soft thud and reached for the flash drive. This contains the off-book emails, he continued. The ones you forwarded from council members asking to take care of certain complaints. The ones where you instructed deputies to classify incidents as training opportunities instead of reportable use of force. In a spreadsheet I built myself, cross-referencing GCSE stop data with racial demographics and complaint logs. The pattern is undeniable. Pute's gaze flicked toward Diane again. She hadn't moved. She was speaking quietly on her phone, likely coordinating with incoming federal personnel, but her eyes never left the 2 men. Haynes picked up the briefcase. I'm going to walk over there and speak to Special Agent Carter, he said. I'm going to tell her the county is cooperating fully, that I am prepared to turn over every record in my possession to the DOJ Civil Rights Division immediately. And if you attempt to interfere with that transfer, Dale, I will personally file the motion to have you removed from office pending criminal investigation, and I will do it before those federal vans even finish unloading. He paused at the edge of the cruiser hood. One last thing, Haynes added. The moment the DOJ forensics team walks into your records room tomorrow, and they will, the first thing they'll request is your body cam and in-car video retention logs. Every stop, every interaction, every deleted file. If even one frame is missing, that's spoliation under federal law. Felony. He lifted the briefcase. You built this house, Dale. Now it's burning, and I'm not going down with it. Haynes turned and walked toward Diane. She looked up as he approached, recognizing the posture of a man who had spent decades in courtrooms and knew exactly when the verdict was already written on the wall. Special Agent Carter, Haynes said, extending his free hand. Robert Haynes, Calhoun County Attorney. I'm here to inform you that the county is cooperating fully with any federal inquiry. I have compiled records of prior complaints and statistical patterns involving this department that I believe are directly relevant to today's incident. I am prepared to turn them over to your office or the DOJ Civil Rights Division immediately, under chain of custody, if you prefer. Diane studied him for a long moment. Why now, she asked. Haynes glanced back toward Pute, who still stood frozen beside the cruiser. Because, he said quietly, some files are only meant to be opened when the right person is standing in the right parking lot. And in that moment, with news helicopters beginning to thump overhead and the first federal SUV already visible cresting the rise on Route 9, the story that had simmered in silence for 15 years finally broke into full, merciless daylight. Within the hour, the first full DOJ civil rights investigative team arrived. 2 supervisory agents in plain suits carrying briefcases and wearing expressions that said they had walked into departments exactly like this one before. But what they uncovered in the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office records room over the next 48 hours would transform a single Sunday morning stop into the largest pattern or practice investigation the state of Georgia had seen in more than a decade. Dawn arrived cold and unforgiving over the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office on Monday, March 18, 2019. By 6:15 a.m., the parking lot had transformed into something resembling a federal forward operating base. 3 unmarked Suburbans with dark-tinted windows, 2 white cargo vans bristling with antenna arrays, a mobile forensics trailer already humming with generators, and 6 black SUVs bearing the discrete plates of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. No flashing lights, no sirens, just the quiet, deliberate choreography of people who knew exactly how to dismantle a corrupt institution without ever raising their voices. Supervisory Special Agent Marcus Reed, 15 years in pattern or practice investigations, 3 prior consent decrees under his belt, walked through the glass front doors first. He carried only his credentials folder and a single-page preservation order signed at 2:47 a.m. by a federal judge in Atlanta. Every electronic device in the building, from the server rack in the basement to the body cams still clipped to duty belts, was now under federal seal. Any deletion after receipt of that order would be prosecuted as felony spoliation of evidence. Sheriff Dale Pute waited in his office in full uniform, had centered on the desk, untouched coffee gone cold. He had not slept. Red-rimmed eyes tracked Reed's entrance, but the granite jaw still held its line. The last remnant of a man who had once believed the badge made him untouchable. Reed did not sit. "Sheriff Pute," he said, voice even and uninflected. "We are here pursuant to an authorized investigation under 34 U.S.C. Section 12601. You are not under arrest at this time. You are, however, required to cooperate fully. That includes immediate, unrestricted access to your personal office, all department servers, body-worn and in-car camera systems, internal affairs files, and any off-book records." Pute gestured toward the desk drawers with an open palm. "Help yourself." Reed nodded to the 2 agents behind him. Gloved hands moved with practiced efficiency. The 3rd drawer on the right was locked. Pute slid a small brass key across the blotter without being asked. Inside lay a slim, black, leather-bound ledger. No title, edges frayed from years of use. The agents lifted it out carefully and opened it on the desk under bright desk lamp light. Page after page of meticulous columns. Dates, names, dollar amounts, or favors exchanged, brief descriptions. Councilman T. Ellis, $2,500 campaign check. Dismissed son's speeding citation, March 14, 17. Judge Harlan Crow, private fishing trip Lake Seminole. Dropped DUI charge against nephew, November 9, 18. State Senator R. Caldwell, Atlanta dinner and suite. Quash post inquiry into deputy excessive force, June 22, 19. Lower down, Fresher Inc. Whitfield tip, gas station attendant. Handled per protocol. No further action required. Pute watched them photograph every page. His hands remained flat on the desk blotter. "That's personal," he said. "It's a contemporaneous record of public corruption transactions involving a sworn law enforcement officer," Reed replied without looking up. "That makes it very much our concern." They sealed the ledger in an evidence bag and moved to the basement records room. Sandra Howell, the 23-year department records clerk who had worked there longer than most deputies. unlocked the cabinets without prompting. She had seen complaints arrive, get stamped closed, and disappear into drawers that never saw daylight again. Today she stood in the doorway, arms folded, and watched. The forensic techs connected their laptop to the server rack first. Within 8 minutes they found a red flag, bulk deletions from the body cam archive dated Saturday evening, the night before the Buckhorn incident. The deletions were crude, file fragments remained, enough to begin reconstructing at least 17 previously training-only incidents. Sandra cleared her throat. "There's more," she said. Reed turned. She walked to the locked lateral file cabinet in the far corner. The one installed in 2015 with a combination only Pute and the former chief deputy knew. Sandra had watched the locksmith. She had also watched Pute change the combination every January 1st using the same 4 digits, his daughter's birthday. She entered 0-7-1-4. The drawers slid open. 3 accordion folders labeled only with years. No case numbers, no stamps, just handwritten notes in Pute's blocky script clipped to each front cover. The agents photographed every document before touching originals. What they found were the ghost complaints, the ones never entered into the official log. Phone calls to Pute's personal cell, walk-ins rerouted before reaching intake, emails from council members asking the sheriff to make it go away. One folder contained printed apologies the department had forced complainants to sign before releasing impounded vehicles. Another held petty cash receipts for medical bills paid quietly after use of force incidents. By 11:40 a.m., Reed placed a secure call to the section chief in Washington. "We have clear probable cause for pattern or practice," he reported. "Disparate impact documented. Systemic suppression of complaints confirmed. Off-book ledger establishes public corruption predicate. Recommend full team deployment, forensic audit of all servers, and immediate facility preservation order." The section chief's reply was instantaneous. "Approved. Team wheels up within the hour. Secure the building. No one in or out without your sign-off." Back at Buckhorn, now cordoned with yellow tape, Diane Carter still stood beside her Tahoe. She had not slept either, but her posture remained unchanged. When Supervisory Special Agent Patricia Holden arrived at 1:15 p.m. in an unmarked Suburban, she walked straight to Diane and pulled her into a brief, fierce embrace. "You okay?" Holden asked. Diane nodded once. "I'm fine, but this department isn't." Holden glanced toward the sheriff's cruiser. Lights finally dark. "He's still inside, talking to his attorney," Diane said. "Probably trying to control the narrative." Holden smiled thinly. Too late for that. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the pines and the mobile command post lights burned against the dusk, the first wave of additional DOJ personnel began arriving. Auditors, interview specialists, forensic accountants. They set up right there in the Buckhorn lot, on the same patch of asphalt where the cuffs had clicked shut less than 36 hours earlier. Sheriff Dale Pute watched from the store's back office window, face illuminated by the blue glow of television screens, showing his own cruiser on every channel. He had walked into situations like this 1,000 times before and walked out untouched. This time the ground had already shifted beneath him, and the people who had spent years filing complaints in his silence were finally being heard. When the federal grand jury convened in Albany the following week, the first witness called was not Diane Carter. It was Deputy Greg Fenton, who walked into the U.S. Attorney's office without a lawyer and said 4 words that would echo through every courtroom in Georgia: "I want to talk." 1 week later, March 25th, 2019, the federal grand jury room in the Albany courthouse felt smaller than it looked on blueprints. Windowless, fluorescent lit, 12 citizens seated around a long oak table, listening as the U.S. Attorney's lead prosecutor laid out the case in calm, methodical strokes. The first witness called was not Special Agent Diane Carter. It was Deputy Greg Fenton. Fenton walked into the antechamber without an attorney. 31 years old now, father of a 2-year-old daughter, he had spent the previous 6 days staring at the ceiling of his spare bedroom, replaying the moment the cuffs clicked on Diane Carter at Pump 4. When the marshals opened the door, he stood, straightened his civilian button down, and said 4 words that would echo through every courtroom in Georgia for years. "I want to talk." He spoke for 4 hours and 17 minutes. He described the culture inside the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office the way a man describes a house he once lived in but no longer recognizes. Complaints routed directly to Pute, never properly logged. Training sessions that were really just cover-your-ass briefings. Stops that escalated because the sheriff liked results, not paperwork. He named names, sergeants who looked the other way, deputies who learned early that loyalty paid better than integrity. He produced text threads from his personal phone, messages from Pute dated as far back as 2017. Lose the last 2 minutes of cam footage on the Johnson stop. Training issue only. No report needed on the fairground thing. Tell them we talked to the family. Closed. Fenton did not cry. He did not apologize in sweeping terms. He simply answered every question with flat, factual precision, the way he had been trained to write incident reports before the training became selective. When the prosecutor asked why he had come forward without counsel, Fenton looked at the table for a moment. "I have a daughter," he said. "She's going to grow up asking what her dad did for a living. I want to be able to tell her I eventually did the right thing, even if it was late." The grand jury returned true bills on 11 counts against Dale Pute within 48 hours. The trial itself began in October 2020, delayed by motions, COVID protocols, and the sheer volume of evidence. Courtroom 3B in Albany was packed every day. Reporters, civil rights attorneys, former deputies who had quietly resigned, local residents who had driven hours just to sit in the gallery. Patricia Coleman occupied the same third-row seat she had claimed on opening day, still carrying the phone that had started it all. Pute took the stand in week 3. He wore a charcoal suit that hung loosely, 37 pounds gone since the Buckhorn incident. The granite jaw remained, but the eyes were different, watchful, almost hunted. The U.S. attorney began gently. "Sheriff Pute, when Special Agent Carter identified herself as a federal agent and stated she was reaching for credentials, why did you order her placed in restraints?" Pute leaned into the microphone. "We had a call about a suspicious vehicle. Description matched. In my experience, people sometimes claim authority they don't have. And when you opened the Tahoe door and saw the second FBI badge on the console." A pause. "I recognized it was legitimate." The prosecutor placed the enlarged photo of the badge on the easel. "Yet you did not immediately release her. You did not apologize. You did not secure the scene for federal arrival. What?" Pute's gaze dropped to his hands. "I believe we could resolve it locally." The prosecutor moved to the ledger, projected page by page on the courtroom screens. "These entries, Sheriff, dated over 11 years, show campaign contributions, private trips, and favors exchanged for dismissed charges and quashed investigations. Do you dispute that these are in your handwriting?" Pute's voice came out quieter than anyone expected. "No." And the text messages entered into evidence, in which you directed subordinates to delete body cam footage and classify use of force incidents as training only. Are those authentic? A longer pause. Yes. The cross-examination lasted 97 minutes. By the end, the gallery was silent except for the soft scratch of reporters' pens and the occasional creak of a wooden bench. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 41 minutes. When they returned, the foreman, a retired schoolteacher from Albany, stood and read the verdict form without looking at Pute. On count 1, conspiracy to deprive persons of rights under color of law, guilty. Count 2, obstruction of justice, guilty. Count 3, pattern of racketeering activity, guilty. 11 counts, guilty on every one. Judge Eleanor Vasquez set the form aside and addressed Pute directly. "Mr. Pute, you turned the sheriff's office into a personal fiefdom. You buried complaints. You rewarded loyalty over law. You created an environment where deputies believed they could act with impunity until they handcuffed the one person they could not afford to get wrong." She paused, letting the silence fill the room. "The sentence of this court is 20 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole before 15 years served. You are ordered to forfeit all assets traceable to racketeering activity, including pension benefits and real property acquired during your tenure. Restitution in the amount of $4.2 million will be paid to identified victims through a court-supervised fund. The gavel fell, sharp, final. Pute was led away in cuffs. No one cheered. The gallery simply watched him go. Outside the courthouse steps, Diane Carter stood in a navy blazer and jeans, aviators hiding her eyes. A reporter approached. "Agent Carter, comment on the verdict?" She removed her sunglasses. "I didn't come here for vengeance," she said. "I came here because someone had to stand still long enough for the system to catch up. Today it did." She walked down the steps toward a waiting Suburban. Inside sat Holden and Deputy Director Jameson. They drove away quietly. No lights, no sirens. 6 months after sentencing, as the last of the consent decree reforms took hold in Calhoun County and the new Civilian Oversight Board held its first public meeting, Diane Carter returned to Buckhorn Fuel and Food one quiet Sunday morning. Not as an agent on duty, but as a woman who simply needed gas and to see, with her own eyes, that ordinary mornings could still happen without fear. 6 months after sentencing, September 2020, the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office looked different in the morning light. The old sign out front had been replaced with one that read, Calhoun County Public Safety Department, in plain block letters. No sheriff's star, no flourish. The parking lot held fewer cruisers. 17 badges had been turned in during the consent decree's first wave of terminations and early retirements. Body cameras were now mandatory, with footage uploaded automatically to a cloud server no one in the building controlled. A 5-person civilian oversight board, 3 locals, 2 appointed by the DOJ, met every month in the same conference room where complaints used to disappear. The reforms were not cosmetic. They were structural. Every traffic stop was logged with racial demographic fields visible to the auditor. Use of force incidents triggered automatic review by an independent panel. The department's insurance carrier had quietly raised premiums by 340%. The county commissioners were still arguing over how to pay for it. On a quiet Sunday morning, exactly 18 months after the Buckhorn incident, Diane Carter pulled her black Tahoe, same model, same federal plates, fresh tires, in a pump number 4 at Buckhorn Fuel and Food. She was off duty. No surveillance op the night before. No debrief looming. Just a long weekend drive south from Atlanta to see family in Florida and the familiar low-fuel chime on the dashboard. She stepped out, swiped her personal card this time, lifted the nozzle, and let the tank fill. The air smelled the same: diesel, hot asphalt, faint coffee from inside the store. The pumps hadn't changed. The faded billboard across Route 9 still advertised the same injury lawyer. Todd Whitfield was still behind the counter. He had aged in small ways, a little heavier, hair shorter, but he recognized the Tahoe instantly. When Diane walked in to pay, old habit, she never left the pump without going inside. Their eyes met through the register glass. Todd froze for half a second. Then he gave a small, careful nod. "Ma'am," he said quietly. Diane returned the nod. "Morning." She placed a 20 on the counter for the gas and a bottle of water. No mention of the call he made that Sunday. No mention of the video that had played on every major network for weeks. Just a transaction, ordinary and brief. As she turned to leave, Todd spoke again, almost too soft to hear. "I'm sorry." Diane paused at the door, hand on glass. She looked back. "I know," she said simply. Then she stepped outside into the sunlight. Back at the pump, she replaced the nozzle, screwed the cap, and stood for a moment with her palm flat against the warm metal of the Tahoe's hood. The same hood she had once been pressed against in cuffs. She looked up at the pale Georgia sky, the same sky she had stared at while the tank filled 18 months earlier. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel vengeful. She felt steady, because the system had not fixed itself overnight. It had been forced to move. One video, one file opened, one deputy who finally spoke, one county attorney who chose the law over loyalty, one retired schoolteacher who decided to press record instead of looking away. 47 complaints had been reopened. 12 resulted in civil settlements, totaling $8.7 million paid by the county's insurer. The remaining 35 were still working their way through mediation or federal court. Some would settle quietly. Some would go to trial. All of them were finally being heard. Diane climbed back into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot onto Route 9. She did not look in the rearview mirror. Behind her, Patricia Coleman's Honda Civic rolled in for coffee. Same parking spot between pumps 2 and 3. She still carried the original phone in her purse. Footage backed up in 3 different clouds. She still taught Sunday school at the Methodist church down the road. She still believed that bearing witness was the smallest, most ordinary act of courage anyone could perform. And somewhere in Asheville, North Carolina, Greg Fenton was teaching his daughter how to ride a bicycle in the driveway of a modest ranch house. He had not spoken publicly since the trial. He never would. But every time he looked at his little girl, he remembered the morning he chose to walk into a federal field office without a lawyer, and he stood a little straighter. Calhoun County was not perfect now. No places, but it was different. Measurably, irreversibly. And on quiet Sunday mornings at gas stations across America, when a black woman steps out to pump gas and feels eyes on her from inside the store, she no longer has to wonder quite so hard whether someone will press record. Because somewhere in a Honda Civic behind a counter in a records room, or in a quiet moment of conscience, someone already has. The end. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that justice isn't always loud or fast, but sometimes arrives in the patient accumulation of ordinary people refusing to look away, then hit that like button so it reaches someone who needs to believe the system can still be forced to listen. Share it. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Because these stories exist whether we tell them or not. But when we tell them loudly, together, something changes. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.